Look, stupid, here's how it's done. You stand in front of the oven like this, and then you just bend down a little, that's all.
I'm flying. This is magic. Oh shit.
Watch out.
Don't get me wrong, I love a good fairy tale as much as the next person. However, there is a word for a fairy tale posing as science.
Bullshit.
Science and bullshit are not interchangeable, as Sir Isaac Newton used to say.
Fortunately, in science, bullshit is very easy to pinpoint.
Easy.
And the way we pinpoint it is we ask the ultimate question. When developing this idea, did you use the scientific method?
Did you?
What is the scientific method? First, you get an idea called a hypothesis. You take the idea, you take the facts, you take your assumptions, and you test them. You get results. And if the results support your hypothesis, you publish them and it becomes a theory. If the results do not support the hypothesis, but you insist that the hypothesis is actually
It is a fact.
then it's bullshit. In this story we will see how we got from the three whales to the Big Bang,
Boom, boom.
why they're similar, and as we go along we will also try to separate science from bullshit. There is a popular notion out there that back in the ancient times and up until very recently, a lot of people on this planet thought that the Earth was placed on top of the backs of three whales. And then there's like water all around it. A variation of that notion is that instead of the whales, there were elephants standing in a drink. Now that is bullshit. People have known that our planet is, in fact, a sphere forever. The ancient Greeks knew, the ancient Egyptians knew, the Mayans knew, the Aztecs knew, the Bantu and Swahili tribes knew, and the ancient Chinese people knew that too. Now, if you're new to science or you have never given it much thought, and you skim through these publications geared towards the mass consumption to give the layman an idea of what cosmology is, how the universe works, and so forth, and the history of it, you'll probably get this impression, a vague impression that, say, up to the Middle Ages, late Middle Ages, folks around the globe thought that the Earth was flat, and then a bunch of mad scientists came along and they discovered that the planet is in fact a sphere, and they tried to share this knowledge with the rest of us, but big bad church came in and tried to suppress this knowledge and so forth. And you get that feeling that there's something amiss here, something's not right, something's not adding up. And you'll be right. And that feeling is a very good indication that what you're dealing with is actually...
Isn't it romantic? Music in the night, a dream that...
Said people have always known, forever, Earth is a sphere.
No shit.
Simply because in many regions there are elevations, hills, mountains.
Or just trees.
And throughout history, folks climbed those mountains, those elevations,
or just trees,
went up in order to see further, in order to change the angle.
Look, Paris.
That can only be possible if the Earth is in fact a sphere. Speaking of the mad scientist who wanted to share this knowledge that he acquired in the Middle Ages, the image of the mad scientist, as we know him today, is also bullshit. It's funny, it's comical, it's very convenient if you want to put a scientist in a movie and show how different that scientist is from the rest of the people. But what they usually end up doing in the movies, they portray nerds.
1.21 gigawatts! 1.21 gigawatts!
Now, don't get me wrong, I love Christopher Lloyd and his character in that particular movie as much as the next person. I do, I really do. But in the real world, nerds are nerds and scientists are scientists.
Now, if you think back to your school days and remember your class, there's always one or two nerds per class. And the class usually consists from anywhere from 20 to 40 people. And that's usually the ratio, 1 or 2 nerds per 20 or 30 people. And that ratio applies
I disagree.
to all other things, all other fields of human activity. Being a nerd is a character trait. It has very little to do with intellect, IQ, knowledge, or anything else for that matter. It's like having a certain hair color or being of a certain height. So if you picked 20 or 40 brilliant scientists from anywhere in history, 1 or 2 of them would be nerds. The rest of them would be ordinary looking people with ordinary behavior patterns, indistinguishable from anyone you can meet in the street on a daily basis.
But let's move on. Okay, so now we have the 3 whales thing back in the ancient times. There has been some progress since then in mythology.
Woof.
Today we have the Big Bang Theory, and it has its proponents, advocates. So let's hear what that is all about.
We really don't know what there was at or before the very beginning of the universe.
We don't know.
But we do now know what happened a tiny fraction of a second later.
Oh, don't tell me, the whales came.
From a minuscule, dense, hot dot, the size of which about 1 trillion would fit on a pinhead, the universe was born. When it came to be, it unleashed an unbelievable amount of energy. And for a brief second, it expanded faster than the speed of light.
Faster.
Growing to the size of a galaxy.
So, no whales? Bummer. Only a few years ago, they used to say that before the Big Bang there was nothing. There was a big lot of nothing, which means there was no lot of anything because there was nothing. And in that nothing, suddenly there appeared a singularity. And then it went boom. But
Boom.
that was against everything that science knows. It was against math, against physics, against astrophysics, against relativity, against everything. That ran contrary to everything anybody ever believed. Nothing can only beget nothing.
Things have changed since then.
Suddenly we don't know what was before that.
We really don't know what there was at or before the very beginning of the universe.
So maybe there was something. So we are, once again, we're edging back towards Genesis. We are not for the moment concerned with the weaker points of the Big Bang Theory. And there's a lot, it doesn't hold water at all, and any high school student would be able to prove it wrong. He or she thought about it for about 5 minutes. The problem with high school students is that they are in that age bracket where people don't actually think other than about,
Hey!
She's hot.
I'm hot.
We're not concerned with the Big Bang Theory as a theory because it's not. It's a hypothesis. We are just concerned with the story. How did we get from the whales to the Big Bang thing? Because that story is actually a lot more dramatic than the actual Big Bang Theory, that as a myth is not very inspiring. Really, it's not. It's boring. It's blah. But the steps involved in it. How did they ever come up with the idea? Those steps are fascinating.
Fascinating.
Remember, men is a creature of association. So, let's get back to ancient Greece for a moment. Now, back in ancient Greece, depending on the time period, there were two theories that kept replacing each other. One was that the Earth was in the center of the universe, geocentric, and the other that the Sun was in the center of the universe, heliocentric. Back in ancient Greece, they didn't have telescopes. They just assumed and surmised based on what they saw up in the sky, depending on the location, where they were at the moment.
Location is everything.
Here comes the important phrase, man is a creature of association. What does that mean? Well, we can't imagine anything or envision anything based on nothing. We need to have a frame of reference, something to refer to, a reference point.
White. No. Nothing.
We need something basic, some element, something we've
seen, heard, touched, tasted, smelled.
If we don't have anything to base our conclusions or imaginings on, our imagination stops.
It just stops working.
Nothing can be created out of nothing.
Each new idea consists of a bunch of building blocks, previously known elements, and a couple of new elements.
I would imagine, and this is just a hypothesis, that back in ancient Greece, power, human power, kept fluctuating between democracy and pseudo-dictatorship. In other words, the power, the political power, was concentrated in a small number of hands, or there would be more democracy. More people would have a say in political structure of the country, in taxation, in economic laws, and so on and so forth, in trade. So, when the power was concentrated in just a few hands, or sometimes the hands of just one person, the geocentric hypothesis would take over. Me, and everything revolves around me. And then when the Greeks became more democratic periodically, their philosophers would switch to the heliocentric theory. There is one center up there in the sky. The law is for everybody and nobody is above the law. The sun affects everybody equally. The two very prominent thinkers back then, philosophers, were Plato and Aristotle. Now Plato, of course, is the author of the famous quote. You do the quote.
No.
What do you mean no? It's your turn.
No, it's not.
Just go ahead and do it, okay? Thank you.
Okay.
In a truly democratic state, each citizen would have an equal amount of living space, food, clothes, and slaves.
That's Plato's definition of a democracy. Plato was a funny man.
Hysterical.
And Plato believed that the sun was in the middle of everything. And Aristotle believed that the earth was in the middle of the universe. Maybe. When all is said and done, come to think of it, neither is true. And then there was the Roman Empire. The Romans did not bring anything new to the table. Geocentric, heliocentric. Now there's one interesting point about the days of the Roman Empire and the whole cosmology thing. Somewhere at the dawn of the Roman Empire, the Savior came. You may very well ask, the Savior being the Son of God and God, obviously knowing everything about the structure of the universe, why didn't he tell us how it all works? Again, God moves in mysterious ways. So this is just a guess, but I figure he does not take our fantasies seriously enough. Sort of like, you know what? Yes, there is a tooth fairy. Yes, she exists.
Well, maybe I could just hang out here for a little while and tuck you in and sing you a lullaby.
Then there was the fall of the Roman Empire, followed by a couple of centuries of the plague. Eventually, civilization got up from its knees, recovered, and started going again. At that point in time, and for many centuries, the Church, Catholic Church, was the keeper and curator of all kinds of human wisdom, including scientific wisdom. Now comes the 15th century. And in the 15th century there was this man. He was of the church, he was a priest, he eventually rose through the ranks, became a cardinal. He was truly a genius philosopher.
No way.
What do you mean, no?
Only a philosopher.
Oh, I'm sorry. My bad, you're right.
No
He
shit.
was a philosopher, a mathematician, and a physicist. Is that better?
Infinitely so.
Thank you. One of his ideas was that there is no such thing as a perfect circle anywhere in the universe. That predated, by a couple of centuries, predated Kepler's idea that the planet's orbits were elliptic, not circular. Another idea of Nicholas's, you know what?
No way.
You know, it's your job. I'm sorry.
Okay. The movement of the spheres is detectable only in comparative terms.
He didn't get out a lot.
Do your job.
No problemo.
Wherever anyone would be, he would perceive himself as the immovable center. Thus someone on Earth regards himself as motionless, and the sun is moving. Woof. Similarly, if he were on the sun, he would regard the sun as motionless, and the Earth as moving.
Now that is the foundation of relativity.
The very theory for which Einstein did not get the Nobel Prize.
Scotty, beat me up.
Einstein got the Nobel Prize. You're so ignorant. That was not fair.
So, what are we doing about Galileo?
We'll do a trivia show with Bruce Willis and Richard Dawkins.
Really? You want to do that? Richard Dawkins?
He has a huge following.
Well, yeah, he's gonna talk about evolution and all that stuff, and I'm gonna have to comment on it.
I'll be the host, and Slick might come and clown around while you're commenting.
Alright. Let's do the trivia show.
Somebody better fix this fucking window. Welcome to the Galileo Trivia Show. Let me introduce our participants. Bruce Willis, a Hollywood expert on astrophysics and other important matters. Please look at the screen. In the year 1998, Mr. Willis said, and I quote, "Organized religions in general, in my opinion, are dying forms. They were all very important when we didn't know why the sun moved, why weather changed, why hurricanes occurred, or volcanoes happened." Ricky?
I absolutely adore Mr. Willis. He is a wonderful actor. He's got a great comic gift. He's got a charming personality too, which I personally admire. And sometimes he says shit that, that's just like, wow, it just blows your mind. For the record, no, we do not really know why the sun moves. We have a bunch of ideas, nothing written in stone. We don't know, really, what gravity is, nor how it works. We can see it works, we can use it, but we don't know anything about the mechanism. No, we don't know why weather changes. We see a whole bunch of causes, and yes, there's a bunch of weather channels out there, but they are not doing any better than Merlin used to do more than 1,000 years ago. As to why volcanoes happen, no, we don't know anything about that either. We have no idea, really, what's going on inside, under the core, inside the planet. We have a lot of hypotheses, some of which we pass off as facts, but they don't become facts because we say they're facts. No, Mr. Willis, we don't know why the sun moves, so yes, even according to your logic, we still need an organized religion.
Our next participant is Richard Dawkins. Mr. Dawkins is the world's leading expert on evolution and why there is no God. In one of his interviews, he bravely states the following.
Fossils, however, are not the most important evidence. I think even if there wasn't a single fossil anybody had ever found in the world, the evidence for evolution would be entirely secure. If you look at the resemblances between animals and between plants, they fall on a wonderful, neat tree, a branching tree. To put it in a sentence, the distribution of animals on islands and continents is exactly what you would expect if evolution were true.
Expect.
Darwin knew about this evidence, but there's a whole lot more since Darwin's time.
Ricky?
This is not one of his best comments, even though what we find as we do our research is exactly what we expect, is, I must tell you, like one hell of an argument.
It's a good device for economists. We knew this crisis would happen, and lo and behold, it did. The question is, why didn't you tell us earlier?
It's also a good ploy to get grants from the government. Like, we ran some tests, and the results are exactly what we expected. So please give us some money. That is not science. On the fossil record, I like what Louis Black says. Louis Black is a comedian, and he's a staunch believer in evolution. And he actually comes out in front of the audience and says,
and then there are fossils. Whenever anybody tries to tell me that they believe it took place in 7 days, I reach for a fossil and go, fossil. There are people who believe that dinosaurs and men lived together, that they roamed the earth at the same time. And what this is, purely and simply, is a clinical psychotic reaction. They are crazy. They are stone cold fuck nuts.
There's a whole bunch of believers out there in the so-called fossil record, which is a belief that all these fossils can be chronologically arranged. We supposedly put it all to the test. And we have dating techniques. Doesn't mean we go out on a date with fossils. No. All these dating methods, you have to have a lot of faith in them in order to say that they are correct and they prove that there is such a thing as a chronological fossil record, and that it proves the existence and well-being of evolution. These methods are hardly scientific. If evolutionists really tried to employ the scientific method, they would have to admit that as evidence, all their data is a lot of wishful thinking. There's also a whole bunch of assumptions presented as evidence where it comes to the actual transformation. One species becomes another species. There is no factual evidence there. The phrase missing link refers to the transitional species that has never been identified, never been found. In other words, you have one species and you have the other. There's nothing in between. Reptiles, mammals. How the hell did that happen? What are things in between? They're all missing.
No evolutionary event has ever been reproduced in a laboratory.
An evolutionist should enter a laboratory and reproduce in front of our eyes an evolutionary event, such as one species becoming a different species.
Yeah, fuck.
So all this talk and eloquence of Mr. Dawkins is a lot of wishful thinking, is a lot of fitting facts such as they are to ideas such as they are.
Hi, son. I ain't your son, dumbass, stupid fucking reptile.
Suffice it to say that there isn't a single shred of evidence that any animal on this planet has ever crossed its species boundaries and become some other animal. Species fluctuate, reacting to changes in their surroundings, which is why we have brown bears and grizzly bears, tall trees and small trees.
No tree species has ever become a bush. No pigs, or elephants for that matter, can fly except in fairy tales, one of which is called the evolutionary theory. However, Mr. Dawkins has a higher purpose, a much bigger purpose than simply tinkering with evolution, and he says so openly.
You can go to these people in their churches, fundamentalist churches, and you say, look, you don't have to be an atheist to believe in evolution. Now, if your aim is to propagandize in favor of evolution, that obviously is the best seduction technique. But if your aim is to kill religion, as mine is,
Now, based on that statement, turns out that Mr. Dawkins is not really an evolutionist. He's an anti-religion warrior. And evolution is incidental. It could have been anything. If he thought that playing hockey would kill religion a lot quicker, he would have become a hockey player.
if you look up the word theory in the Oxford Dictionary, you'll find two main definitions. One is the only a theory one, as in, it's just a hypothesis, nobody knows for sure, it's just a theory. The other one is a body of knowledge which is coherent and which is taken to be factual, which is taken to be factual until maybe something better comes along. The colloquial term for what evolution is fact.
Yeah.
It is a fact.
Here I have a copy of the Oxford Dictionary, and there are not two but four different definitions of the word theory. The word fact or factual is never mentioned in the definition of the word theory in the great, wonderful, magnificent, terrific, awesome Oxford Dictionary. So you see, stating as Mr. Dawkins does that evolution is a fact.
It's just bullshit, pure and simple.
Back to Galileo. Question for Mr. Willis.
There was a man in Italy whose name was Orazio Grassi. He was a Jesuit. In addition to being a Jesuit, he was also a mathematician and a physicist and an astronomer.
There were two theories about comets in Galileo's time. One was that comets were extraterrestrial objects traveling in space along very large orbits. The other was that comets were an optical illusion. They didn't really exist.
Orazio Grassi and Galileo had a dispute over this, and when Galileo published one of his books, in the introduction, he mocked Orazio Grassi's theory and sort of implied a number of times that Signor Grassi was a moron.
Which theory do you think belonged to Galileo and which to Grassi?
Galileo, space objects. Grassi, optical illusion. Incorrect.
Alright, Mr. Dawkins, Galileo's contemporary, Johannes Kepler, came up with a hypothesis that the planet's orbits were not really circular, they were elliptical, they were ellipses. What did Galileo think of that idea?
He thought it was a pretty sound idea.
Incorrect.
Actually, Galileo's conviction was that orbits were perfectly circular.
Perfectly.
He refused to even consider Kepler's idea. Participant number 3. Galileo studied the tides. Now, again, his contemporary Johannes Kepler came up with a hypothesis that the tides had something to do with the moon. What did Galileo think of that idea?
He thought it was interesting.
Incorrect.
Galileo thought that Kepler's idea about the tides having anything to do with the moon as useless fiction. About the famous trial. People who haven't looked into this, like, seriously, deeply enough, get this idea from the evolutionists and their ilk that Galileo was put on trial because the church, big bad church, wished to suppress any light that science shines on us. Now, in reality, Galileo managed to piss off a lot of people because of the kind of person he was. He was a brilliant thinker, but he was also a brilliant talker and a storyteller. And he didn't like it when people argued with him because, you know, I'm talking.
Hey, I'm talking here. I'm Galileo. What the fuck, people? Shut up and listen.
He also was of the opinion that anything he ever said, that anything that came into his head, was already more or less by definition a fact. It was not a hypothesis, not a theory, but a fact, you know.
It is a fact.
And whoever doubted that any ideas of Galileo's were facts were
stone cold fuck nuts.
So in that manner he managed to piss off a prominent Jesuit, Orazio Grassi. And then came the Pope's turn. Now the Pope, Urban VIII, was a sweet man up to a point. He patronized the arts. He loved enlightenment. He supported Galileo even prior to becoming a pope. They were actually friends. They had lots of discussions together.
Glass of wine, Galileo?
Sure, what you got?
Now, prior to Galileo's tantrums, there was a guy who was Polish, who was an astronomer, who was a man of the church. His name was Copernicus.
Who resurrected Plato's idea that the sun was in the center of everything, and scribbled a few formulas to support it.
The preceding popes loved Copernicus's idea.
Awesome.
They did. Now, Galileo took it upon himself to champion that idea, that the sun is in the center of the universe.
Well, it is.
And he had discussions and debates about it with the Pope, Urban VIII. And the Pope kept telling him, you know what, yeah.
It sounds like a great idea, just, but there are other views, and they too have a right to exist.
And Galileo said, fuck no. It's my idea, therefore...
It is a fact.
And the Pope said, okay, you're going to publish anything on that subject? And Galileo said, yeah, I'm going to write a book in the form of dialogue, okay? There's going to be a bunch of characters discussing this, the arguments in favor of the idea, arguments against the idea. And the Pope said, well, you know my view of it, right? You know my idea. I think that the Earth is in the center of the universe. And Galileo said, yeah, I know. You told me numerous times. And then the Pope said, you know what? I'll support the publishing of the book. I'll do a little PR for you. But you know what? You gotta do me one favor, just one favor, okay? When you're writing this book, put my ideas into the mouth of one of the characters. And make this character say, like, look, guys, that may be true, but this also may be true. Heliocentric, geocentric. And Galileo said,
yeah, okay, I'll do it.
Did he do it?
Not quite the way the Pope expected.
He invented a character whose name, loosely translated into today's English, would be moron. And this moron, the character by the name of moron, was the mouthpiece for the Pope's geocentric idea. And the Pope read it. And at that point, the Pope did a very unchristian thing, just like the Jesuit Orazio Grassi did before him. He did not turn the other cheek. He got pissed instead.
Can you blame him? Picture yourself as the target of this.
Stone cold fuck nuts.
I would be pissed.
As a good Christian, you shouldn't get pissed. You really shouldn't. You should fight that temptation. Turn the other cheek. Do good things instead. But man is weak. Sometimes even the Pope. The Pope got together with the Jesuits and they decided to put Galileo in his place. So this was very, very personal.
Had nothing to do with the church doctrine.
Nothing to do with Christianity.
And nothing to do with science.
Both the Pope's model and Galileo's model were obviously, as we know today, wrong. You shouldn't call people morons if you expect to remain on friendly terms with them.
He was really a brilliant guy, in spite of his shortcomings. On the side, he was very interested in pendulums, swinging. He discovered that no matter how great the oscillations are, how small, a swinging something seems to complete the full swing oscillation in equal intervals. That gave him a good idea for making a clock that worked that way, with a pendulum. Generally, that particular time in history is marked by a lot of mechanical invention. There was a lot of invention everywhere. And mechanics was all the rage. Again, man is a creature of association, right?
Well, yeah, that's the whole point.
Interesting.
Since the mechanics was all the rage, then what happened?
The universe became mechanical.
Exactly. People started making up various new theories as to how the universe worked. Man is so made that as soon as we see something like totally new to us that impresses us a lot, we automatically assume that everything else around us is made exactly like that.
So that's how it all works?
So the universe was like the swinging pendulum, clockwork, and it was mechanical.
And incidentally, that was an idea that Galileo felt very passionate about, and it was more heretical than anything he ever said or did.
anything else he ever came up with, like heliocentric, geocentric, who cares? A mechanical universe is something that doesn't sit well with the inventive mind, with the creative mind, and with a faithful mind, faithful to the original creator. It's all mechanics, it's all shit moving around. Everything is shit moving around. Whether it's on a big scale, cosmic scale, macro level, or micro level. Molecules, atoms, electrons spinning around the nucleus and so forth. It's all mechanics. So maybe our spirit is mechanical too, and so on and so forth. The mechanistic universe is an idea we're still kind of stuck with to this day, thanks to Galileo and his followers. Unfortunately, does not allow us what?
What? I didn't say anything.
To explore or even just think about other dimensions. Folks who explore the universe and try to apply math to it, or physics to it, or chemistry to it, are limited by the materialistic view of how everything works. You leave out spirit, you're left with nothing. Again, heliocentric, geocentric, plus the mechanistic idea. Everything is because the shit just keeps on moving, right?
I know, fuck.
Okay. Now, after Galileo, there was Sir Isaac Newton. Newton came up with a whole bunch of interesting ideas, some of which are very useful in everyday life. 3 laws of motion, classical mechanics, all that is based on the idea that matter and energy are never depleted or increased. They change form once in a while, but the actual amount of matter and energy in a given closed system always stays the same. And then, you know what? You do the boring part. I'm gonna have a drink.
No, no way. Come back, asshole. All right, you've got 2 balls.
Oh, zip it.
The sum total of their mass and kinetic energy will always remain the same. If one of them is stationary and the other moving, when it hits the other ball, some or all of the energy is transferred to it, and the sum total of the mass and energy remains intact. The only reason a rolling ball stops rolling is some other fucking force imposes itself on it. Some other object, or just friction, or the air, or whatever. Otherwise, it would just roll and roll forever. Something like that.
Brilliant.
Well, how did it go?
Just don't even ask. It was your fault, too.
Oh, please. What, you upset? You didn't like the husky?
She's mean and stupid. Probably married, too.
She's not your type.
You're missing the point.
How about a poodle?
So long as she's not uncouth.
Okay. You got a poodle. So, as my colleague just explained about the balls and stuff, you know, energy never goes anywhere and matter never goes anywhere. They change form and sometimes they change into each other. Newton's laws of motion, they not just predate, they imply the law of conservation of energy and matter. You take a log and burn it in your fireplace. The molecular structure of the log breaks, turning whatever mass it has into energy, which gives us heat. The rest, the matter, turns into what? Water, carbon dioxide, and bits and pieces
also
of
known
earth.
as ashes and charcoal.
But it's all still there. Mass can be turned into energy. We do it habitually. We burn fossil fuels to cook our food, to make things, and to feed ourselves. The reverse, we cannot really do that on a big scale. What Sir Isaac Newton may or may not have realized, though, it's not a law of physics, a law of nature. It's a law of pretty much everything.
Buy me a drink?
It applies to economy, psychology, relationships, war, anything. Anything. For instance, there's only so much wealth. This point was underscored in the movie that everybody loves for some reason, the original Wall Street, where the guy said that the amount of wealth doesn't change. It's always the same, it just changes hands.
How much is enough?
It's not a question of enough, pal. It's a zero-sum game. Somebody wins, somebody loses. Money itself isn't lost or made, it's simply transferred from one perception to another.
Ergo, when somebody gets very, very rich suddenly, overnight, it means that somebody out there, or a bunch of people, suddenly have gotten very poor overnight. So the first one of Newton's laws is about the preservation of momentum, kinetic energy. Anything that is moving at a certain speed, in a certain direction, will want to always continue to be moving in that direction at that speed. And anything that is stationary wants to remain stationary. Okay, the second law treats of action and reaction. Every action produces an equal reaction, because matter and energy do not go anywhere, they're always there. And this is something the powers that be would need to remember now and then. In a crisis, when they insist on continuing making as much money as they were before the crisis, the amount of wealth has suddenly shrunk because the resources are depleting, or because somebody has stolen a lot of money and gone to Mars with it. You know, you gotta get with it and you gotta get real and look at other people, what's happening to them. Corruption is a matter of course, embezzlement is a matter of course, but it's gotta be kept within reason.
Once upon a time, there were 4 girls and 1 fat manager. The only food the 5 of them could have was 1 pizza pie a day. When the pizza arrived, the manager took 4 slices for himself, and the girls shared the rest. One day, the price on pizza dough went up, and the pizza place could only deliver 7 slices instead of 8. The manager still took his 4, and the girls shared the rest. But for the next 10 days only 5 slices were delivered each day, and still the manager took his 4 slices, and the girls had to share what was left, which was 1 slice. At the end of the 10th day, united they stood.
What the 5 had enough.
This is bullshit. Let's kick his ass.
And rose as one, and set out to kick the manager's ass, which wasn't good for anybody, neither the manager nor the girls themselves.
Because you insist that for you, nothing has changed. I mean, a good, full-fledged, well-publicized economic crisis is not the right time to be dismissive, to act arrogant.
Whatever.
It's just unrealistic to expect no reaction.
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning what? Meaning, dude, in times of crisis, you should really, tone it down a little bit.
Seriously.
Yes, there is a crisis. It doesn't mean that you have to raise the prices immediately to keep the profits on the same level and send all manufacturing to China and India to use, Chinese and Indian slave labor. That is suicidal. That is let them eat cake. The Marie Antoinette syndrome. And we all know what happened to her, whether she actually said it or not. Buying up all the media, or most of it, and filling it with pep talk and bullshit sounds vaguely unconstitutional, especially if you share my view of the US Constitution as one of the few precious things that we need to preserve no matter what. Crisis or no crisis. You have to absorb a few losses here and there. You cannot be getting super rich every day. It's physically impossible.
Get it?
Concerning the proverbial horseman that keeps bumping his head into this wrecking ball and falling off the horse.
Boom.
The mass and the energy of the wrecking ball, as well as the energy of the horse and the horseman, and the mass of the horse and the horseman are always there. So if the horseman suddenly decides to cheat the closed system and not use the energy and not go around the energy and the mass of the wrecking ball, but to take it away completely, he is up for a surprise. In some form, it will always remain there. Good for Newton.
For he's a jolly good fellow, for he's a jolly good fellow, for he's a jolly good fellow, which nobody can deny.
But the other thing that was absolutely stunning
was the gravitational thing. Up to that point, we humans knew that the Earth was round, a sphere, for thousands of years. But only Newton said that it has gravity. A person standing anywhere on the surface of the planet, anywhere, any continent, any climate, any latitude, if he or she drops a pen, it always falls down. I mean, they've tried. They traveled to far distant places and dropped a pen there with always the same result, vertically down. That means what exactly? That there's something in the middle there that pulls the damn thing down and makes us stick to the surface. That's why we don't fall off. Gravity. And that's how actually, well, the solar system and the galaxy and the entire universe operates. Everything has a gravitational pull. Anything that has mass. The larger the mass, the stronger the pull. I mean, yeah, there's the famous legend about the apple falling on Newton's head.
Ouch, what the fuck?
What, apples never fell on people's heads before? But no one, up until Newton did, no one thought of it. That, hey, something is pulling things down vertically no matter where you are. Somebody once said that, you know, about the really truly great ideas. Who the fuck said that?
Leave me alone, Ricky. I'm too aroused to remember anything right now.
Anyway, somebody once said that a good theory or a good idea is something that everybody laughs at first, then people oppose it, and then everybody just takes it for granted. Good for Newton. So now we have heliocentric, geocentric, mechanistic, and objects attracting each other. And that's how the universe operates. It's still sort of like clockwork, sort of like a granddaddy clock. You know, all those chains and wheels turning and churning, shit moving around.
What about Franklin?
Franklin?
You know?
Oh, Benjamin Franklin.
Yeah.
Oh, he was a sweetheart. Writer, publisher, musician, explorer, inventor, politician, diplomat. That Franklin, right?
Yeah.
The guy in the $100 bill. He did not add anything to cosmology. All his inventions are actually very, very useful, such as, the bifocals, the lightning rod, and the chart of the Gulf Stream. They actually benefit humanity. I suppose that Benjamin Franklin was too practical a man to believe in fairy tales.
We should travel further in time, closer to our times, towards the end of the 19th century, in fact, when they started improving the telescope. Which brings up the next question. Just what exactly can you see through a telescope? People who have never owned it, have you owned a telescope?
No, I'm afraid not.
I want to have your kids.
You were saying?
Shut up.
Okay.
Okay, people who have never owned a telescope, a decent telescope anyway, have this idea that as soon as you stick that tube into the sky, you see these grand things and grand colors and stuff that they show you in sci-fi movies, you know, Star Trek and the sequels. What's a star look like through a telescope? Yes, it's just a dot. Now here's a picture of Saturn as seen through a fairly powerful telescope. Not too many colors in space. It doesn't look all that wonderful. Why is that?
Wrong question.
You're right. It is the wrong question. Okay, how come when we see photos in magazines or on the TV screen of faraway galaxies and nebulas, how come is everything so colorful, so impressive, supposedly?
That is the question.
That is the question.
That is the question.
You open up a scientific magazine or a magazine on astronomy or an astronomical site on the web, and you see all these beautiful photos taken by the Hubble telescope, for instance. Straight off, That is bullshit. Hubble telescope does not take color pictures because it's not worth bothering with color technology, because space is mostly black and white when you see it through a telescope. Even before the astronomers see those pictures are processed by a bunch of computer programs. Now, computers don't think, they just process data, and they always process data the way we tell them to. They follow our expectations. They give us what we expect. They do not have minds of their own. There is a program out there, or maybe a bunch of programs called FITS, F-I-T-S, that processes whatever the Hubble telescope sends it, and then the astronomers view those wonderful pictures. The Eagle Nebula all by itself may not be suitable for the so-called public viewing.
Color, please.
Meaning us. I mean, we'll look at those black and white blurs and say, what, this is space?
Thank you.
You know what? The Earth here is a lot more colorful, a lot more beautiful, and a lot more wonderful. And that they cannot have. So they combine 3 pictures into one. Then they enhance them 3 different ways, using 3 different filters. So in each picture, depending on how it's filtered, a certain section stands out more. Then they take these 3 pictures and they superimpose color. Then they combine these 3 pictures, and it still looks a little blurry, so I would imagine they enhance it by sharpening them. So the final product looks like this, and they call it a photo, and they publish it. Calling it a photo is, of course, bullshit. It's not a photo, it's a computer-assisted fantasy painting. Now let's just take a moment to look at where and how science fiction writers draw their inspiration.
If you look closely at all the wonders you see in sci-fi movies, you'll realize that none of them are extraterrestrial.
What are these light sheets hanging in space? Is there something similar on Earth? Man is a creature of association. Those sheets of light hanging in space, very close to the planet for some reason, are actually northern lights, also known as aurora borealis. The stuff that you see up in the sky when you're close to the North Pole or the South Pole. Beautiful show, but you don't have to go into outer space in order to witness it.
And all those wormholes are vortices. We see vortices every day. The kitchen sink drain creates a vortex.
Any whirlpool is a vortex.
And there's also, of course, the tornado, and our friend the hurricane, with the eye of the hurricane in the middle. Now, chunks of ice like this are pretty common in northern latitudes, so all those wonders are really Earth wonders, not space wonders. Plus some wishful thinking on the author's part. The further away you get from Earth, the simpler things become. See, the planet Earth is a very, very complex place. We have combinations here, trillions upon trillions of them, not seen anywhere else in at least the solar system. As we sort of know now, most of the universe is just empty space, vacuum. Matter, the stuff of which stars and planets are made, and nebulas, is not all that common in the universe. So in order to balance things out, in order to justify the complexity of our planet, the elements, the entire table of elements is present here. As a matter of fact, it's present in all live beings on Earth. To justify all that luxury of complexity, to balance it out, you'd need more than just a solar system. You'd probably need an entire galaxy to balance things out, or maybe an entire universe, but we'll get back to that later.
What are you reading?
Molly's Revenge.
One of your more sentimental stories?
Maybe that's the reason I like it.
Travel in ancient times was nothing but hardship. I paid $10 for this umbrella.
Yeah, there was plenty of hardship, but the thrill.
That's true.
Can you imagine
Christopher Columbus?
Hiring the crew on like shoestring budget, and actually a crew like that would consist of
thugs and thieves, mostly.
And then getting these 3 like what we laughingly would call ships. They were really glorified eggshells.
With shaky masts.
Rotten through and through. Rat-infested.
Poorly equipped.
Rickety.
Malodorous.
And getting that crew on those ships, and then 5 weeks of buffeting, stormy seas.
Pitching and yelling.
Rain, food running out. Ready to rebel every moment. Slaughter you every moment, and you fending them off with a pair of pistols. And the misery of it. And then when you yourself stop believing, because maybe this ocean is just endless, maybe there is no land out there. But then at dawn, at the end of the 5th week, the guy in the crow's nest suddenly like peers into the horizon and goes, Terra! The joy of that. But let's get back to the story. So now we come to the building blocks of the Big Bang myth. What prompted the creator of the Big Bang myth, who was, by the way, a Belgian priest? Oh yeah, atheists don't have any imagination. What prompted him to come up with the idea? What were the building blocks? There's a few of them.
Could you be more specific?
About 5.
You don't like precision, do you?
Okay, so the first one, of course, is evolution. See, I told you not to invite Professor Dawkins. We would tackle evolution one fell swoop. Now we have to talk about it a second time. See, your fault.
I just wanted to host a show. I'm very vain.
Alright. The so-called theory of evolution is the first building block of the Big Bang idea. There are building blocks there too. Charles Darwin, a decent English gentleman, where did he get the idea? What inspired him?
People of medieval Europe called it the Great Pestilence. A terrifying and bewildering sickness from the east, which brought delirium and an agonizing death. Fear and hysteria gripped the land, and as the death toll mounted, it became apparent that no one was safe and no one could offer protection. As the sickness raced across Europe, communities struggled simply to bury their dead. And they sought answers, someone to blame, or a means to appease God's wrath. This was the Black Death, the greatest biological disaster in the history of mankind.
At some point, the epidemic was over. The population of England started growing rapidly.
England is an island, which is to say, well, space is limited.
And before they knew it, they were running out of wood. Deforestation. They needed wood to build houses, and to cook their food, and to build ships. And because there were more and more people, more and more trees got chopped down, suddenly no wood. So they turned their attention on coal, which they had been using intermittently through the centuries. They knew they could burn it and get heat from it. Now they started paying very close attention. They started using a lot of it. And as soon as that happened, all the interesting qualities of coal came to the surface. That was the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, so-called. The first steam engine was used to pump water out of coal mines. The second one was already transporting coal to a different location on rail tracks, and then it just snowballed from there. The number of inventions escalated.
Charles Darwin was born in 1809 and published The Origin of Species in 1857, when he was already a middle-aged man.
What did he witness when he was a child, a teenager, a young man? When he was a kid, people transported themselves over land and sea in buggies and in sail ships. Charles Darwin remembered that.
I remember it.
Now when he was growing up, suddenly steamships replaced sail ships, and steam locomotives replaced the buggy. Simultaneously, concurrently, contemporarily with that, there were a lot of other inventions. There was the telegraph, the sewing machine, the bicycle. There were suddenly factories springing like mushrooms after a thunderstorm everywhere. So all that gave Charles Darwin this idea that there's a lot of progress around me. And we humans tend to think unilaterally. In other words, what we see around us today, we have this idea that, you know what, it's always been like this. Technological progress is a natural phenomenon. It has always been around, it will always go on, forever. Charles Darwin thought that all that he saw around him, the great technological progress, was achieved through human genius.
Can you blame him? No.
It was understandable because everybody on both sides of the Atlantic and over in Asia and in Africa kept saying the same thing, that this is the age of reason.
Age of reason.
Nobody more so than the English. Well, the Brits, you know, they are peculiar people. They've been blowing smoke up their own asses ever since they lost the 13 colonies.
Have a nice life, you stupid limey.
We'll be just as well without you. We have tea and soccer.
The idea was that knowledge, scientific knowledge in particular, had been accumulating bit by bit over the centuries by dedicated scientists and their assistants, and so on and so forth. This idea prevails to this day. People think that things that we see around them, the so-called modern world, is all thanks to science.
Thank you, science.
Very few people, when they flip the light switch, think of it as I'm burning coal now, which to this day is more or less true. Today, coal is still the primary source of electricity. We burn a lot of it, we heat up some water, it turns into steam.
It pushes the blades of a turbine.
But people don't think in those terms. People think this is technology.
Which, to a certain extent, it is.
But mostly, it's just fossil fuels burning. Darwin saw all the progress and he thought, okay, if this kind of technological progress takes place in our economy, in our environment, then maybe the same is true in biology.
Maybe biology, too, is a creature of relentless permanent progress.
Permanent progress, from simpler things to more complex things, from primitive to more evolved. That was the single biggest mistake he made in his calculations.
He got out a lot, only not with his own species.
And that's the single biggest mistake that evolutionists are making today. When it comes to evidence in favor of evolution, what they do these days, the evolutionists, because they happen to have the entire academic community in their control. When you ask them for evidence of their so-called theory, they throw so much bullshit at you that it's overwhelming. In reality, anything that can be viewed as evidence is very scarce. So much so that they have to resort to fraud in prime areas, such as they've been using Haeckel's drawings in textbooks, even though everybody knows that Haeckel's drawings are sham, and people have known this for over a century now.
Who's Haeckel?
Oh, come on, Haeckel, you know Haeckel, the German guy. You know, Germans, they are good workers. They have contributed a lot to the world's culture, but for some reason there's a problem with painting.
What do Rembrandt, Hals, Goya, Leonardo, Rubens, Turner, Ivazovsky, Monet, Sargent, and Lautrec have in common? None of them were German.
They love it as a craft. They just love, painting little things and big things on sheets of paper and so. Hitler was a painter. And Haeckel too he loved to draw. He drew little pictures showing you how this embryo develops, going through a bunch of stages. And the stages are not similar, but, indistinguishable from one another in humans and other animals.
What can I tell you? I like to draw.
It wasn't a bunch of photographs. These were drawings. And these drawings were immediately recognized as revelatory, and they were put in textbooks. And they're still in those textbooks. What kind of shit is that? Seriously.
Fucking shameful.
Over the years, Haeckel received many awards, not for his drawing ability. and in the end he liked to give lectures.
Alas, poor Yorick. I knew him, Horatio.
By the way, the side effect is Karl Marx and his theory of economy. Karl Marx was Darwin's contemporary, and he saw the same things in his childhood, in his adolescence, in his adulthood. Rapid technological progress. So like Darwin, he took that idea and applied it not to biology like Darwin, but to economics. And he came up with this idea that societies naturally develop from hunting and gathering through slavery, through feudalism, through capitalism, to socialism and then communism, Star Trek style. But that is just a side note. The second idea, second building block of the Big Bang myth is the so-called Doppler effect.
Christian Doppler, an Austrian physicist, was interested in how light works.
He discovered in passing, working with sound, that sound waves get bunched up if the source is moving towards the listener, and then they get stretched out if the source is moving away from the listener. That is the Doppler effect in a nutshell. When an ambulance or police siren is moving towards you, the pitch of that sound goes up. When it's moving away from you, the pitch goes down. Doppler theorized that the same thing applies to light. The light wave gets bunched up if the source is moving towards you, and gets stretched out if the source is moving away. And when the light wave is bunched up, what you see mostly is the blue section of the spectrum. So the light moving towards you rapidly should be blue. If it's moving away from you rapidly, it should be the red side of the spectrum. They say it has been proven experimentally, but the evidence is very vague even to this day. The next building block for the Big Bang Theory is the dynamite. Alfred Nobel, the founder of the Nobel Prize, was an inventor. He was also a pacifist. He hated anything associated with war.
War, no good.
He wanted to end all wars. So his idea was, let me invent a weapon of such unimaginable, terrific force that people would be scared to use it. And then all wars would stop.
Bombs had been around for centuries.
The difference between a conventional bomb of those days and the dynamite is that the dynamite really goes to town.
It's some crazy shit.
It really blows everything to smithereens.
Boom. Sweet.
The invention did not stop anybody from going to war,
No.
but it made Alfred Nobel very rich.
Naturally.
And everybody was very impressed. Look at this, boom! Wow.
Shit.
The final building block of the Big Bang myth are the observations of Edwin Hubble. He was an American astronomer. He had a good telescope, a very improved version of the telescope, and he looked at the sky and he discovered that the further out the light comes from, the redder it is. It's on the red side.
The further out?
What?
Distance?
Oh, yeah. Good point.
You don't say.
How do we know how far the stars are? How do we measure the distance between ourselves and that star? Well, there's a whole bunch of methods. The first one is called triangulation. I love it because it's so witty. We know that our planet, the Earth, right? It goes around the sun in about 12 months altogether, right?
Roughly, yeah.
So at the 6-month mark, we usually like halfway around it. So we point out to ourselves a star that we want to measure the distance to and write down the coordinates. And then we wait. For this you actually need some stars that are behind that star to draw the lines, okay? We draw a line from our planet to that star, then we wait 6 months and we draw another line to that star, looking at the stars behind our star and seeing how they shifted, okay? So what we end up with is this triangle. This is the witty part.
a triangle whose base we know the length of the base, the diameter of the Earth's orbit. Now, knowing the base and knowing that the sides are equal and measuring the angle, we can calculate the length of this line from the sun to that star. There's a whole bunch of problems with it and a whole bunch of assumptions. And when the star is too far, we can't really use triangulation because the angle at the top of the triangle is way too small. Is it 400,000 light years? Okay, past that we can no longer use triangulation, we have to use something else. A lot of methods involving a lot of assumptions. The pulse of the star, we need to know the intensity of that light, from which we deduce the mass of the star, blah blah blah.
So this means what exactly?
It means that the proposition that we know how far those stars really are is only a theory.
You're so intelligent. Let's have sex right now.
Back to Edwin Hubble.
No matter where you point that tube, the stars that are very, very far away, which cannot even be distinguished individually, give off this red glow. Ha! Said Hubble. According to the Doppler effect, that means that they are running away from us. No matter where you point the telescope, everything is running away except our own galaxy. That gave him the idea that the universe is expanding. Why that idea? Because he liked it, and because everybody else liked it too. There can be 1,000 different explanations why that light that he saw and that we continue to see is red. I'll give you two. The first one would be, it's a property of space itself. When the sun sets, it becomes red, because when the sun is setting, the layer of the air between the viewer and the sun is thicker than the same layer of air when the sun is up in the zenith. So the thicker the air, the redder the glow of the sun. It's an optical effect.
Illusion.
People don't like the word illusion. If it's an illusion, then I'm stupid, okay? So let's not say illusion, let's say effect.
Fine.
So the effect is when there's more air between the viewer and the sun, the glow of the sun attains this reddish tint. So maybe when there's a lot of space, like really a lot of space, between the viewer and the source of light out there, the light wave, maybe the space itself, the curved Einsteinian space, renders the glow red for some reason. That's one explanation, different from Edwin Hubble's idea. Another one would be that, look, now everybody says that all those distant galaxies are millions of light years away, which means that today they are not there. What we see was there 1,000,000 years ago, or 100 million years ago, or 1 billion years ago. To say that that's what's happening now, they're running away from us now, it's not logical. It
Irresponsible.
doesn't make any sense. We see the past of the universe. We don't know what's going on there. We don't know what we would see if we aimed a telescope that could see today's universe out there. Maybe there would be nothing, or maybe there would be the picture of somebody's ass. Maybe that's just empty space. So based on that, we can say that maybe the universe was expanding 1,000,000 years ago or 100 million years ago, and now we just don't know what the hell it's doing. So that's not even an explanation, that's just
a supposition.
A supposition. Maybe because all of them are so distant, and again because what we see is not happening today but really happened millions of years ago. Maybe they are not different galaxies.
You may be onto something there.
Maybe what we see are temporal reflections of our own galaxy 1,000,000 years ago from a different side. Because space is curved, it can go in a circle like that. Maybe that is the back of our own Milky Way a few million or billion years ago. Another explanation for the red glow. Maybe back then it was all red. We don't know. So there's a whole bunch of explanations. See, and you can come up with quite a few yourself, you know, if you finished high school at least. But everybody insists that Edwin Hubble is right. Because somehow it just suits the scientific community. I don't know why.
A paradigm is a system of beliefs.
Somebody also mentioned that the speed of light is slowing down over the years, but let's not just go there because that's another can of worms. Okay, so in comes the Belgian priest who takes all these building blocks together. Evolution, the Doppler effect, the dynamite, and the red glow. Expanding universe.
The building blocks of the conceptual model.
And he says, okay, so if it's expanding now, the red glow and so on, it must have been in one place, tiny place a long time ago, and then just like the dynamite, it went boom. Is that scientific? You know, that kind of logic is reminiscent of the old joke about, the two archaeologists.
What joke?
You don't know?
Nope.
Okay, two archaeologists meet, and one of them says, look, I was at this dig in South America, the old Mayan Empire, and we dug down 20 feet, and we found a piece of copper wire.
That means that the Mayans had a telephone network.
And the other archaeologist says, oh, come on, that's so pedestrian. I was at this dig over in Egypt last year, and we dug 50 feet down, and we found nothing.
That means that 3,000 years ago, the ancient Egyptians had already gone wireless.
And that's all there is to it. Those are the associations, those are the reference points.
The building blocks of the conceptual model.
Yeah.
There's nothing else really to the Big Bang fairy tale. That's how it came about. Everything else is just conjecture and trying to fit facts to the big idea.
In other words, bullshit. When you hear a lot of noise, it's probably an evolutionist looking for evidence to support a bunch of preconceived notions.
There is no such thing as a true atheist. Believing that there is no God is a religion. The fact that in order to get any kind of career advancement in science, you have to pay lip service to the current atheist paradigm, that's a given. What's really amazing is the frequency with which various atheists use the word believe. It's truly sensational.
I believe in the number pi.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand you. What was it you said you believed in?
In the number pi, in the golden section, the Fibonacci series. The essence of nature is mathematical. There is a hidden meaning beneath reality. Things are organized following a model, a scheme, a logical series. Even the tiny snowflake includes a numerical basis in its structure. Therefore, if we manage to discover the secret meaning of numbers, we will know the secret meaning of reality.
That, I'm afraid, is pure bullshit. Only a tiny, minute, minuscule fraction of nature is mathematical.
What's a system?
The system is simply an entity whose integral parts can talk to each other.
Our world is composed entirely of systems. Anything's a system. Photosynthesis, marriage, baseball, economy, politics, history, math, human anatomy, all those are systems. And there's a supersystem that incorporates all of them, and we know it as the universe.
And all these systems have similarities. When we examine one system and see how the patterns are unfolding, and compare it to the patterns in another system and find similarities, we figure that this should help us understand that. That is absolutely true, but math and math-based sciences are very obviously the wrong tool to understand the universe. Math is limited by our 5 senses, just 5. The universe is not limited by anything. Math-based sciences, they have been good to us over the years. With their help, we now have engineering, navigational skills, shipbuilding, city building. We really do know today, at least as well as the Romans did back in the day, how to build
a decent house or building. We do, thanks to math-based sciences. Where it comes to measuring the universe and uncovering its secrets with the help of math, that's a horse of a totally different color. The letter pi is the ultimate symbol of our inability to square the proverbial circle, to drive the proverbial square peg into the proverbial round hole.
Math is square, the universe is round.
That which is crooked cannot be made straight, and that which is lacking cannot be numbered. King Solomon.
It's not even like trying to build a house with only a screwdriver. No, it's trying to build a house with a microwave oven. It's not like drilling a tunnel with a handheld drill. It's like trying to drill a tunnel with a helicopter. I love a good fairy tale, so long as people are not trying to convince me to believe in it religiously.